Picture this: a small, fog-shrouded airport on a volcanic island in the Atlantic. Two massive jumbo jets, each the size of an apartment building with wings, sit on the same narrow runway, invisible to each other in the dense mist. In the cockpit of one plane, a highly respected pilot advances the throttles, confident he's been cleared for takeoff. In the other aircraft, a captain suddenly sees headlights emerging from the fog, bearing down on his stationary plane at over 160 miles per hour. What happens next will become the deadliest accident in aviation history. So stow your tray tables, fasten your seatbelts, and prepare for turbulence, because this is Final Boarding Call. Hello and welcome to Final Boarding Call. I am your disaster-obsessed host, Alice, and as always, I am joined by my reluctant homebody husband, Zach.
I'm here, I'm reluctant, let's go.
Let's go. Okay, before we dive in, a quick reminder to our listeners, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And my sources for today's episode is Mayday Air Disasters, Season 16, Episode 3, which is titled Disaster at Tenerife. Also, there is an insane Wikipedia page on this disaster. All right, let's travel back in time. Now, this episode will not be released for a couple weeks while it goes through editing and cleanup and all of that good stuff. But, dear listener, we are actually recording this episode on March 27th, which is when we are traveling back in time. We are going to Sunday, March 27th, 1977.
We've got an anniversary going on.
We do, yes. And I will preface this story by saying this is probably one of the most well-known aviation disasters in history. When I told some coworkers that I was starting an aviation disaster podcast, their first question was, are you doing Tenerife? It is incredibly well known. So I hope that I do this story justice. It's just really a huge bummer. This one kind of sucks. So with that, Zach, you ready for us to do this thing? Now that I set a cheery tone for our episode.
If it helps, because I'm not an aviation disaster junkie, I have never heard of.
Oh my gosh. Okay, wow. Ooh, we have a Tenerife virgin in the house. I can't wait. Okay, the morning of Sunday, March 27th, 1977, begins like any other day in the Canary Islands. The Spanish archipelago off of the northwest coast of Africa is enjoying beautiful spring weather. This collection of volcanic islands rising from the Atlantic is a popular tourist destination, especially for Europeans who are seeking escape from the last chill of winter. At Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport, 234 Dutch tourists board KLM Flight 4805. Many are couples and families that are excited about their upcoming vacation in the Canaries. The atmosphere is cheery as they settle into the blue and white Boeing 747, the pride of the KLM fleet. That's a big plane. The passengers don't know it, but they're in the hands of one of the airline's most prestigious pilots. Captain Jacob van Hulsen van Zanten is KLM's chief flight instructor with over 11,700 hours of flying experience. His face is so recognizable that it literally appeared in KLM advertisements. Like, this dude is the face of KLM. And get this, his face was on the in-flight magazine that was tucked into the seat back pocket on that airplane. Alongside him is First Officer Klaas Moors and Flight Engineer Willem Schroeder, both experienced airmen in their own right. And I apologize for the pronunciations. Obviously, I am an ignorant American. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Pan American World Airways, Pan Am, Pan Am, but it actually is the full name of Pan Am is Pan American World Airways. Flight 1736 has already departed Los Angeles and made a stop in New York, now carrying 380 passengers. That's a lot. Mostly American tourists, many of retirement age. The jumbo jet is crossing the Atlantic towards the Canary Islands. In command is Captain Victor Grubbs, with First Officer Robert Bragg and Flight Engineer George Warnes. Their aircraft, named Clipper Victor, holds a special place in aviation history. It was actually the first Boeing 747 ever delivered to a commercial airline and had operated the inaugural 747 passenger flight in January 1970. It was the OG.
It's actually OP.
The original plane. Oh my goodness gracious. So Zach, I don't think I explained this to you, but the 747, she a big girl. She is not like the 737s that everybody kind of thinks of. The 747 is big. It had an upper deck. That's how baller this plane is. It's huge. So the 747 can fit 10 across. So it has 4 that are kind of in like a middle section, and then it has 3 on either side of that 4 middle section. So for most people who have taken international flights or flights from the continental US to Hawaii, that's kind of the traditional seating for a plane that you would take for that. However, the 747 has a schwanky, like bucket list experience upstairs of the airplane. There are ones that have like freaking fish tanks. So if you've been on the upper deck of a 747, please let me know and also take me with you. It's important that people understand how massive these planes are. It's a ton of people on both of these flights. Both flights are bound for Las Palmas Airport, which is an airport that's part of the Canary Islands. But events are already unfolding that will divert these aircraft from their intended destinations. At 1:15 p.m. local time, a bomb planted by Canary Islands separatists exploded in the flower shop at the Las Palmas Airport's terminal building. So both of these planes head into an airport. Just by crazy, freaky coincidence, a bomb goes off, literally in the airport. The explosion itself causes only minor injuries, thank goodness, but a telephone call warns of a second bomb. Obviously, authorities make a critical decision, which was to shut down Las Palmas Airport while they conduct a search. What those authorities don't know is that by doing that, they have set in motion this insane chain of events. So the closure forces numerous incoming flights, including our 2 747s, to divert to the smaller Los Rodeos Airport on neighboring Tenerife Island. This is a single runway with a parallel taxiway situated nearly half a mile above sea level on a plateau. Its high elevation means that it is prone to sudden fog and low visibility as clouds roll in from the Atlantic and get trapped against the volcanic mountains. So, this airport is the ittiest bittiest of airports. It has one runway. And now it is getting a shit ton of traffic coming from an international airport that is no longer accepting flights. So it's dealing with this influx of huge international aircraft. Plane after plane is arriving, and the airport becomes increasingly congested. At 2 p.m., the KLM Boeing 747 touches down at the airport. About 45 minutes later, the Pan Am jumbo jet joins it. The diverted planes have to park on the main taxiway because there is literally not enough room at the terminal gates. This means that aircraft wanting to take off will need to taxi down the runway itself, then turn around 180 degrees to get back into takeoff position. So this is, think of like a fashion runway. So they are going to go down the runway. This huge jumbo jet is going to go ahead and just pivot itself around, get settled, and then it's going to take back off from the direction that it just came. This is a procedure that is called a backtrot. It honestly is very rarely needed at larger airports with multiple runways and taxiways, but we ain't at a large airport, folks. As the afternoon wears on, Las Palmas Airport reopens. So what that means is that all of these planes that were scheduled to go there now are like, great, let's get this show on the road. The Pan Am crew is ready to depart, but their aircraft is blocked by the KLM 747 and a refueling truck. So Captain Van Zanten has decided to refuel his aircraft at Tenerife rather than making a short hop to Las Palmas with minimal fuel and refueling there. So this is a logical decision for many reasons, but it would add 55 minutes to their ground time while they refuel. So next time you're at the gas station, you're like, oh my God, this is taking so long. It's taking 55 minutes to put fuel in this airplane. Okay. Woof. While the KLM plane is being refueled, some passengers decide to disembark and explore the terminal. So this was back in the lovely days where you could actually get off of the airplane and then get back on when it was time to go. Now, almost certainly, if you're getting off of the airplane, you're very rarely getting back on that airplane. I just experienced this actually a couple trips ago. They made everybody get off. And then even though everybody got back on that plane, they brought everybody's baggage to the terminal and everybody had to get their bags and then go like back through security. While the KLM plane is being refueled, some passengers decide to disembark and explore the terminal. Among them is a Dutch tour guide named Robina van Landschot, who actually lives on Tenerife. She decides that it really made no sense for her to fly to Gran Canaria, only to return to Tenerife the next day. She's like, this does not make sense. My plane has been delayed. Like, I'm kind of over it. This seemingly minor decision to stay behind while the rest of her tour group continues on, literally, you could say, the best decision of her life. She had actually tried to convince her friends who she was traveling with to also get off with her when she decided not to go back on the airplane. The KLM crew also spends time searching for a missing Dutch family of 4 who haven't returned to the aircraft, further delaying their departure. Eventually, the search is abandoned, and the family is presumably still in the terminal, and the KLM prepares to leave. By now, it's nearly 5 p.m., and the weather at Los Rodeos is deteriorating rapidly. The airport sits at an elevation of 2,000 feet, which means that clouds at 2,000 feet above sea level at the coast are literally at ground level of this airport. Patches of dense fog are rolling across the airfield, significantly reducing visibility. As both aircraft prepare to depart for the short flight to Las Palmas, neither crew can imagine the catastrophe that will unfold in the next few minutes. The light is beginning to fade as a blanket of fog settles over Los Rodeos Airport. In the control tower, a single air traffic controller is managing all ground movements and takeoffs, with no ground radar to help him see the aircraft through the thickening mist. He must rely entirely on radio communications and the pilot's reports to know where the aircraft are on the field.
Well, I think that it is also then having to rely on pilots that are not at that airport every day, knowing exactly where they're at, and just taking their information and saying, this is correct. I'm going to bet everyone's lives on it.
It's so scary. At 4:58 p.m. local time, the controller instructs the KLM flight to taxi down the entire length of the runway and then make the 180-degree turn to position itself for takeoff. Visibility is deteriorating, with the cloud ceiling now down to about 500 feet. Captain Van Zenten acknowledges these instructions and begins to taxi. Through the cockpit windows, he can see the fog thickening around them. There's an urgency in his movements. KLM's duty time regulations have been tightened earlier this year, and the delays at Tenerife means that the crew is approaching their maximum allowable on-duty hours. If they exceed these hours, we all probably know what that means. The flight would be canceled. All of the passengers, we would need overnight accommodations. Like, it's a logistical nightmare, given the already extremely overwhelmed facilities on the island. So this pilot is like, I'm getting everybody out of here. We're doing this thing. Come hell or high water. Meanwhile, the controller instructs the Pan Am flight to follow the KLM down the same runway, but to exit via the third taxiway on the left, and then continue on the parallel taxiway. This would get both planes into the position for takeoff while avoiding the congested main apron area. The instructions seem straightforward, right? 1, go down the main runway, make a 180-degree turn, prepare for takeoff. The other one, follow behind, take the third exit on the left, exit, and then wait for your turn to use the runway and take off. Eh? Everybody following?
Even I'm picking up on that.
Okay. Outstanding.
I guess my immediate question is, did the KLM flight acknowledge?
Oh, we're going to get into all of that. You're already getting too smart. We're just starting this journey. Okay. So the instructions seem straightforward. However, there are several complicating factors. First off, there was construction happening at this airport on top of everything else. There's construction. There are no clear markings identifying the taxiways. That's an issue. Second, the fog is becoming increasingly dense, making it difficult for the pilots to see where they are going. Bad.
And there's no radar on the ground.
No. I mean, they are literally blind. They are going at this blind. Third, and perhaps most significantly, the exit that the controller wants the Pan Am flight to take would require an extremely difficult 148-degree turn, which is nearly impossible for an aircraft that is as large as the Boeing 747.
Why can't they do 148 degrees?
So the Boeing 747 requires 30.5 meter minimum on paved surfaces. Sharp turns risk tire stress or runway excursions. So basically what it does is it creates a blind corner scenario where pilots might overshoot the exit and collide with obstacles.
And then the reality is at the end of the runway, they have a whole lot of room to swing right and then stay on a paved surface and take a wider turn, where the opening for taxi 3, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Is just a smaller, narrower strip to where they couldn't have all that runway.
Yeah. So imagine trying to parallel park a bus in dense fog with no lane markings.
And no rear view mirrors.
That is essentially what the Pan Am crew is being asked to do. So the KLM aircraft reaches the end of the runway and executes its 180-degree turn. Captain Van Zunten positions his 747 for takeoff, facing north. Meanwhile, the Pan Am aircraft is still taxiing down the runway, trying to find the exit because it's not marked. And this is obviously where things are going to go terribly wrong. As the KLM plane completes its turn and is lining up for takeoff, First Officer Mers begins to complete the pre-takeoff checklist. Part of this process is obtaining ATC clearance, permission from the control tower to take off, right? That seems like a logical part of that process. So he is still running through the checklist, and Captain Van Zunten advances the throttles, and the KLM jumbo jet begins to move forward. This is all happening in the KLM plane. First Officer Mers is beginning to complete the pre-takeoff checklist, right? Part of this process is obtaining ATC clearance, permission from the control tower to take off. While our first officer is doing this, the captain of the plane, the one with the controls, is advancing the throttles, and the KLM jumbo jet begins to move forward. So the first officer, who is still going through this checklist, is literally like, whoa, wait, we don't have ATC clearance yet. And our captain replies, I know that. Go ahead and ask. So the first officer then radios the tower. The KLM 4805 is now ready for takeoff, and we're waiting for our ATC clearance. The controller responds with what will become a fatefully ambiguous message. KLM 8705, note that is the incorrect flight number. First off, you are cleared to the Papa Beacon. Climb to and maintain flight level 90. Right turn after takeoff, proceed with heading 040 until intercepting the 325 radial from Las Palmas VOR. Now, that was like a whole bunch of hoopla, but here is the really relevant and important thing. First off, the incorrect flight number is very, very important. Second off, this is not a takeoff clearance, but it is a clearance of the route the KLM should follow after takeoff. In aviation terminology, Zach, there is a crucial difference between route clearance and takeoff clearance. All right? Think of this like the difference between getting directions to your destination versus actually being told that you can start driving to the destination. Our first officer reads back the clearance to the controller. And this is quote, Roger, sir, we're cleared to the Papa Beacon, flight level 90 until intercepting the 325. We're now at takeoff. The phrase, we're now at takeoff, is also ambiguous. It could mean either we are now in position for takeoff, or it could mean we're going to take off now. The ambiguity of both of these interactions is going to prove extremely critical. So the controller responds with, okay, followed immediately by, stand by for takeoff. I will call you. However, at the exact same moment, the Pan Am crew transmits, we're still taxiing down the runway, Clipper 1736. Now, Zach, you and I have worked multiple race events that rely on radios to communicate things that are happening at the events. What happens when two people try to use the radio at the same time?
You get Kathy yelling at us saying that we're stepping on her line, and it doesn't come through.
Yeah. We love Kathy. But yes, more critically, what happens is that you get sort of a like sound that's really terrible, and you absolutely miss the entire correspondence that's supposed to be happening. Now, when we're at the racetrack, it's usually something fairly minor. This correspondence, obviously, extremely critical. Again, the Pan Am crew transmitted, "We're still taxiing down the runway, Clipper 1736. It couldn't be more clear, but the controller would never hear that. Due to radio interference, a phenomenon called heterodyning, where two radio transmissions overlap and partially block each other. These two critical transmissions create a shrill noise," which I just provided for you. You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty horrible. While this is happening, that shrill noise is heard in the KLM cockpit. As a result, the KLM crew misses the controller's instruction to stand by for takeoff. So two critical messages were not heard. The first one is that the controller did not hear that the Pan Am airplane is still on the runway. The second critical overlap is that our big old jumbo jet, the KLM, that is at the end of the runway, ready to take off, did not hear the controller say, "Stand by for takeoff, I will call you." So all they heard was, "Okay."
That's a message that even me not being a pilot, if somebody says okay, I assume that I'm good.
Whew, this is a lot of miscommunication that's all happening, and there's a lot of planes with a lot of people on them involved. In the KLM cockpit, again, this is the plane that is on the runway preparing for takeoff. Flight engineer Schroeder, who has been listening to these exchanges, asks, "Is he not clear, that Pan American?" He obviously knew that there was a plane behind them. He did not hear confirmation that the Pan Am was off of the runway. So kudos to flight engineer for calling that out. The flight engineer is literally asking, is the Pan Am plane clear of the runway? This is a critical safety check.
These are the questions we got to ask.
It shows that at least one crew member is concerned with where the Pan Am flight is. Captain Van Zunten replies empathetically, "Oh, yes," and he continues the takeoff roll. With that simple affirmation, fate is set. The KLM 747, with its 4 powerful engines at full thrust, accelerates down the runway into the fog, completely unaware that the Pan Am jumbo jet is directly in its path.
I just don't even have anything to say to that. That is a very unfortunate circumstance there.
It's like horrible. And I think it's one of those things where often I tell these stories and it's like one tiny little, like a washer was wrong or like a switch was in the wrong place. But this one is so frustrating because it's a plane. A plane is in the way.
A giant plane.
This is not like...
And there's so much fog you can't see, and they weren't using the radios correctly to be able to confirm where they were at.
No, this is a whole damn plane that is just on the runway. Okay, so let's go inside the Pan Am flight for a moment here. Inside the Pan Am cockpit, Captain Grubbs and First Officer Bragg are still trying to locate the third taxiway. They still don't know where it is. Visibility has deteriorated to less than 300 feet because of the fog. And with no clear markings, finding their assigned exit is like trying to find a side street with no signs in the fog.
Well, that does bring up the question to me. If their visibility was roughly 300 feet, how long is a typical airstrip for departure? I picture something like a mile.
So at small airports, it's around 1,000 feet. At huge international airports, there could be runways that are over 18,000 feet. The average is between 8 and 13,000 feet for a typical runway length. And I absolutely just looked that up, folks. I did not know that off the top of my head. I just want to set expectations here.
She's lying. She stores all of this information in the places where she could remember my name.
Okie dokie. The Pan Am crew had been instructed to report when they were clear of the runway, but they're still taxiing on it, very carefully making their way through the murk and the horrible fog. They're traveling slowly. They are aware of the poor visibility and the very unfamiliar layout. Suddenly, through the misty veil ahead, they spot something that shouldn't be there. The landing lights of the KLM 747 bearing down on them at high speed. In that moment of horrific realization, Captain Grubbs explains, "What's he doing? He'll kill us all." First Officer Bragg shouts, "Get off, get off, get off." Essentially saying, we need to get off of the runway. Get off, get anywhere. Go into the dirt. Anywhere, please get off, get off, get off.
Well, that is my curiosity. If they are, sitting in parallel runways, what is the width in between them? Would they have a chance, if they were able to see it longer, to veer off and basically go into the ditch in between?
They aren't on parallel runways. They're on the same runway.
Yeah, but there are parallels, so there's one right next to it. That's why they were looking for exit 3, to get on the other one real quick and loop around.
Yeah, I guess if you think about if you're about to have a head-on collision in a car, you would logically probably go into the dirt or some sort of median that would separate two roads, and that would seem like a logical thing to do. I'm not a pilot, and I have never captained a jumbo jet before. However, they move pretty slow. Like anybody that flies knows that there's, you hear the pilot put on full throttle and you hear the and then it feels like 25 seconds later, the plane actually picks up speed and starts accelerating. And this plane right now is crawling.
Well, that's fair. I'm just picturing in my head, like on the interstate where you have roadways going both directions, and is there any room in between? But I do understand that they're not on throttle. They are creeping down the runway trying to see everything, and someone is coming at them full speed already.
But your thought process is the exact same as Captain Grubbs, because he did realize that their best course of action was going to be move, try and get out of the way. So he does apply full power, and he turns the aircraft very sharply to the left, attempting to leave the runway to avoid this collision. However, like I just explained in my own terms and then I rewrote it again in the script, the enormous 747 responds sluggishly to emergency inputs. She has no torque.
This is a snail at full sprint.
It's the most extreme case of turbo lag that you've ever heard in your entire life. This thing just is crawling, but Captain Grubbs is trying. So the plane, he's got that thing cranked to the left. He is on full throttle. In the KLM cockpit, the jumbo jet is now traveling at over 160 miles per hour. the speed of a Formula One race car and well past the point of no return for aborting a takeoff, especially with something that heavy. You think about the difference between a Formula One car that's driving that quickly, needing to stop, versus a semi-truck.
When you're talking these international jumbo jets, they've got to be weighing in somewhere around, I don't know, I imagine 30 to 40,000 pounds.
I think usually 300 tons.
I was way off base. I apologize. I can't imagine 300 tons flying anywhere.
It is almost 1 million pounds.
Wow.
So I don't know what that is in tons, because I'm an ignorant American. Yeah, 333 to 447 tons. So not to brag, but that I actually did know off the top of my head. So I'm going to pat myself on the back for that one. Couldn't tell you the length of a runway, but I did know that a jumbo jet weighs around 300 tons. Okay. And yes, it seems like something that large should not logically be able to leave the ground. That's why aviation is so cool. Okay, back to our story, folks. When the KLM pilots finally see the Pan Am aircraft through the fog, they are less than 1,000 feet away, which translates to only a few seconds away at the speed that they're currently traveling. In a desperate attempt to avoid the collision, Captain Van Zenten pulls back hard on the control column, trying to get the fully loaded 747 airborne. This is earlier than it would normally be able to take off. The nose of the KLM does lift, and the aircraft does begin to actually become airborne. And for a brief moment to both planes, it does seem like there might be a chance that the plane will miss a collision. The KLM 747's nose gear does actually clear the Pan Am, but the undercarriage, the engines, and the lower fuselage strike the upper right side of the Pan Am aircraft just behind the cockpit. They are going 160 miles per hour over that. The impact tears the top off of the Pan Am plane, along with the entire length of its fuselage. So this is a 350-ton aircraft traveling at 160 miles per hour, slamming into another 350-ton aircraft. The force is absolutely catastrophic, shearing off the top of the Pan Am like a can opener. The KLM aircraft, with its landing gear severed and left engines destroyed, remains airborne for only a few seconds before crashing 500 feet beyond the collision point and erupting into a massive fireball, fueled by the nearly full fuel tanks that had just been topped off. The collision occurs at 5:06 p.m. local time. The entire sequence, from the KLM beginning its takeoff roll to the moment of impact, took a total of less than 30 seconds. All 248 people aboard the KLM flight perish instantly in the collision and the fire. On the Pan Am, the impact and fire kill 335 of the 396 passengers and crew. So remarkably, 61 people, including the flight deck crew, survive the initial impact.
At this moment, and you were very specific, survive the initial contact, I would honestly prefer to be one of the people that just perished instantly. I mean, a quick and painless death is about all you could hope for there.
That was a really good catch, because unfortunately, there are people who do pass away after this incident happens. So most of the survivors had been seated in the forward section of the aircraft. So they were obviously before the part of the plane that was impacted super severely. Adding to the tragedy is the fact that rescue efforts are hampered because of the fog and the confusion of the incident even happening. So the control tower had not witnessed the collision at all due to low visibility. And they are initially completely unaware that 2 aircraft have even been involved. Many firefighters initially focus their efforts on the more visible KLM Fireball, not realizing that there is another aircraft with survivors only a few hundred yards away. That's how thick this fog is.
That's wild to picture that, you know, you barely see the fireballs and you don't even recognize that there's another plane attached to it somewhere.
Yes. I mean, it's just crazy. The survivors of the Pan Am flight describe a scene of absolute horror. So many escape through holes in the fuselage, climbing into the intact left wing. There, they wait for rescue, which is very slow to arrive because people don't know that the plane is there. Some survivors recall that they can hear the engines of the Pan Am aircraft still running after the collision, but the cockpit roof has been torn away in the impact, leaving no way for the flight crew to shut them down. All control lines have been severed in the collision. Eventually, most of the survivors on the wing drop to the ground below and make their way towards the terminal. I guess they're just like, no one's coming, so I'm just gonna get off this wing and walk. Or they are assisted by the rescue personnel who do eventually reach the scene. All right, are you ready for the numbers?
I'm ready for numbers.
In the aftermath of the collision, 70 people initially survive, but 9 will die from their injuries, bringing the final death toll to 583 people. This remains the deadliest accident in aviation history, period, across the world. This is it. Within hours of the disaster, investigators begin arriving on Tenerife from around the world. Spain's Civil Aviation Accident and Incident Investigation Commission, that just rolls off the tongue, leads the investigation with representatives from the United States, the Netherlands, and of course, both airlines. Imagine the scene at Los Rodeos the morning after the crash. The fog has actually lifted, revealing the full extent of the devastation. The KLM aircraft lies in a charred heap just beyond the runway. The Pan Am, its fuselage torn open, sits on the runway itself. Debris is scattered across a very wide area. The smell of jet fuel and smoke still hangs in the air. The investigators have the challenging task of piecing together what happened in those fateful final moments. Fortunately, both aircraft have... What do they have, Zach?
Black boxes.
Yeah, they got black boxes, which is going to prove incredibly helpful. Together with both of these black boxes, they were really able to get a detailed story of how this went down.
Yeah, it kind of paints a picture for itself, I would say. I mean, they have the radio communications, they have the throttle inputs, they have all the information on hand there that they knew the weather was terrible because it was terrible when they got there. And it's probably pretty easy to see exactly what happened.
Yeah, I think what's going to be most interesting is that they are going to be able to hear one plane calling something in, and then in the other plane hearing just the static sound. They are going to know that there was some sort of overlap in radio communication at that moment, and it was probably pretty important information that got lost. The Spanish investigators conclude that the fundamental cause of the accident was that Captain Van Zanten had attempted to take off without proper clearance. But if we remember back to the beginning of this episode, This is not an inexperienced pilot.
But that's half the time the biggest issue is that somebody with that much experience just thinks that they can, one, do what they want because they understand how everything works, but they might have a little bit of overconfidence and think that nothing can go wrong with them.
That's all possible. Definitely all could be factors. The investigation suggests that several factors may have contributed to his decision. So let's see if they agree with your analysis. So you said kind of an overconfidence based on experience sort of issue.
Yeah, and the guy was clearly, a great pilot, but sometimes you let that get to your head and you don't necessarily follow every rule to the letter.
Yeah. Okay, so here is the official report. First, Van Zanten was under pressure due to KLM's duty time regulations. Do you remember that? They were like, we have to get this plane off or it's going to be a big freaking deal for everybody. The delays at Tenerife meant that the crew was approaching their maximum allowable on-duty hours. If they exceeded the hours, the flight canceled, passengers, overnight accommodations. It would be a logistical nightmare. So they want to avoid that.
The very expensive company would lose dollars. Can't have that.
No, yes, exactly though, Zach. I mean, it is a bureaucratic nightmare. Second, obviously the weather. I mean, the weather was rapidly deteriorating, but as a pilot, he should know that the fog at Los Rodeos could quickly become so dense that takeoffs would be prohibited, potentially delaying them for hours or even overnight. So that's another thing where he's like, okay, before they ground all the airplanes, we got to get this pony up in the sky. Third, the communication with the tower. When First Officer Moores said, "We're now at takeoff," and the controller responded with, "Okay," Van Zanten may have interpreted this as confirmation for takeoff clearance. Despite the controller's subsequent instruction to stand by for takeoff, which was obscured by the radio interference. Fourth, there was the matter of crew dynamics. Both First Officer Moores and the flight engineer Schroeder did express concerns, and those were picked up on the black box. Moores initially reminded Van Zanten about the missing ATC clearance, and Schroeder explicitly asked if the Pan Am was clear of the runway. But neither pressed the issue when their concerns were dismissed.
Yeah, that is another part. When it comes to flight safety, and I'm sure that it is all standard protocol now, but if somebody questioned that in front of me, say I was a pilot, which I am not, I just feel as though I would re-radio the tower and confirm the situation.
You'd be a great pilot, by the way.
I don't have the eyes for it.
That's so true. Yeah, Zach's like blind, but other than that, he would make a really, really great pilot.
I can barely count my fingers at the reach of my own arm without my contacts in.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't need fog. It would be like a foggy takeoff for you every time.
They still got to go. Why can't I?
No, dark. Okay. This reluctance to challenge the captain more forcefully might have been influenced by Van Zanten's status and experience within KLM. Remember, this is the guy who is literally on the magazine in the seat back pocket of that airplane.
I bet he's not anymore. Redacted.
Oh my God. Please don't sue us, everybody. Oh my God. So dark. Yes. So this dude is a big fucking deal. BFD. As the airline's chief flight instructor, he was not only their superior in rank, but he was one of the most respected pilots in the entire company. Going against his judgment would have required exceptional large balls. Balls of steel. Balls of brass. Balls of brass and steel.
Combined?
Combined. Yes, big, big, big brass balls. The Dutch authorities initially pushed back against the Spanish report. So this is interesting. So that's the Spanish report. The Dutch authorities are like, wait a minute. They are arguing that it places too much blame on the KLM captain alone. They emphasize that it was really a mutual misunderstanding between the controller and the KLM crew. And they point to several contributing factors. The crowded airport had placed additional pressure on all parties involved. The Spanish controller's use of the phrase okay was ambiguous, and that could have been interpreted as a takeoff clearance. The Pan Am had taxied beyond the third exit, where they had been instructed to turn off.
I was actually curious about that too. I mean, if one plane got all the way down to the end of the runway, did a 180, and was ready to take off again, the odds are the other one had already cruised past.
Yes, but there were no signs and they couldn't see.
And, well, they have them operating with one controller in some crazy dense fog and nobody knew the airport.
Correct. However, KLM eventually accepts responsibility for the accident and pays compensation to the victims' families. Captain Van Zanten, who had been one of the airline's most visible figures, is never publicly blamed by the airline, though his name became obviously linked to this disaster.
But you have to respect a company for having their guys back.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And we will get down. I did write a section about how they view him in light of this incident, and it's honestly like really impressive, and we'll get there when we get there. But I do really like the way that they look at what happened, because obviously it's a massive tragedy, but we're all only human after all. In addition to the human factors, the investigation identifies several systemic issues that contributed to the tragedy. The airport lacked ground radar, hence the use of walkie-talkies essentially with airplanes. 2 jumbo jets, and they are just like, hey, how you doing? Absolutely ridiculous.
I can't see.
I can't see.
This sticker is dangerous and inconvenient, but I do love Fig Newtons.
Oh my gosh. And if you know what that's from, go ahead and leave us a comment and we'll send you a sticker. Because Zach, that'll be a normal thing for Zach. He'll definitely quote movies. And if you know what it is, we'll hook you up. So the use of non-standard phraseology in communications between the tower and the aircraft, red flag on the play. Huge issue. The airport was operating well beyond its designed capacity due to all of the diversions from the large airport. But perhaps most significantly, the disaster highlighted the dangers of what would later be called authority gradient, the inability or unwillingness to go against a superior crew member, even if you really feel like there is a safety concern.
But that still completely exists today in almost any chain of command. You don't question what your boss tells you. You don't question what your commanding officer tells you. None of that stuff. They might say it's okay, but it's not.
Well, we are going to see how things changed, right? Because that's really one of the reasons why we tell these stories. It's horrible that planes crash and that bad things happen and that people die. It's terrible. But every single episode, there is a takeaway and something gets better. So if that was a big takeaway, let's see what they did to try and alleviate that. The Tenerife disaster, with its horrific toll of 583 lives lost, becomes a watershed moment in aviation safety. Its legacy includes fundamental changes to the way that pilots are trained, how air traffic controllers communicate with aircraft, and also how airports are designed and operated. That's some big, heavy shit. Let's get into the meat of it. One of the most significant outcomes was the development of Crew Resource Management, or CRM. It's a training protocol designed to improve teamwork, communication, and decision-making in the cockpit. CRM explicitly teaches pilots that hierarchy should never impede safety-critical communication, and that first officers and flight engineers not only have the right, but are actually obligated to speak up if they have any concerns. So I actually like this, because what this means is if there is some sort of incident, God forbid, like a Tenerife situation again, it would be everybody's shared responsibility in that cockpit. It's on everybody to make sure that things are being safe and protocol is being handled properly. So that's big. Think of it as a complete rethinking of cockpit culture. So before Tenerife, many cockpits operated like corporate America with a very strict hierarchy, with captains having near absolute authority. After Tenerife, aviation embraced a more collaborative approach, recognizing that safety depends on input from everyone. Another major change involved the standardization of aviation phraseology. This is probably one of the most well-known changes that came from this incident. The kind of like, we're making it up as we go along. Some people are native to a certain language, some people are not. You're flying internationally. It gets very, very confusing. After this incident, English was determined to be the universal language of aviation.
Which doesn't make any sense since the English language is such a joke.
It's because we are too ignorant to learn other languages. So
How do you spell ear with a B? Beer? No, it's bear.
Let's take an example here. The word takeoff, important word in aviation. It is now spoken only when the actual takeoff clearance is given or when canceling that clearance. That's it. So if you hear that word, that means either I am taking off or I am canceling a takeoff. That's it. It is not pertaining to taxiing. It is not pertaining to getting ready for takeoff. It is like we're doing the takeoff.
It is not you're clear to head down the runway, do a 180, and take off.
Until that point, pilots and controllers use the word departure.
And everybody's heard you are clear for departure.
You hear like flight attendants prepare for takeoff. And then it's like, that's it. We're taking off. Acknowledgements like okay, or even the term Roger, like Roger that, not acceptable on their own. Pilots must read back the key parts of the instruction to demonstrate that they understand. Additionally, the disaster led to the implementation of challenge response checklists, where each item requires a specific call out and response between the pilots. So this is something that we have reviewed in like the Helios episode, obviously, where the checklist was a critical part of what went terribly wrong. But the point of this checklist is supposed to prevent something like that happening. The tragedy also highlighted the importance of airport infrastructure. So as a direct result, a second airport was actually built on Tenerife. And this is the Tenerife South Airport, which now handles the majority of international flights to the island. The original Los Rodeos Airport, renamed Tenerife North, was equipped with ground radar and improved runway lighting. Literally the bare minimum. It wasn't supposed to have big airplanes like that. I mean, it's a teeny tiny little airport. Woof. In the aftermath of the disaster, memorials were established to honor the victims. In Amsterdam, a national memorial and final resting place for the Dutch victims was created. And then in the United States, a memorial was established, actually at Westminster Memorial Park in California. And in 2007, on the 30th anniversary of the disaster, an international memorial called Stairs to Heaven was inaugurated on Tenerife itself. The crew members who died in the disaster were remembered by their colleagues as dedicated professionals who, in one fateful moment, became part of the perfect storm of circumstances that led to disaster. Captain Van Zenten, whose decision to take off without clearance initiated the final sequence of events, was remembered by KLM as an exemplary pilot whose decades of safe flying were overshadowed by one single error. I think that's really powerful. I mean, obviously the error was one of the worst in history.
It was world-changing.
It was
not just life-changing.
Yes.
But that error is not solely on him, even though even I, listening to this story, put a little bit of blame on him and a little bit of it on his experience and all of that. But I'm not the person that believes that a bad thing should ever overshadow all the good that you've done.
And I think it's a good reminder. I have what is classified as like a high-stress job. I do like corporate high-stakes event planning professionally, and my job gets stressful. And oftentimes I have to take a step back and remind myself, like, I'm not performing heart surgery. I am not piloting a jumbo jet. If something goes wrong in the event, people don't die. It will be okay at the end of the day. Everybody will get to go home to their families and talk about it tomorrow.
The worst they can say is, that catered food was a little dry.
The dried chicken. Terrible. But it really does kind of put into perspective. You know, this guy had a insanely high-stakes job, and when you make a mistake and that is your job, it can be absolutely catastrophic. So next time you're feeling stressed at work, maybe you are a heart surgeon. That's cool. But most likely, you're probably not. And people probably aren't going to like die if you make one mistake. So in the midst of this unimaginable tragedy, there was one person who, by a twist of fate, avoided being part of the grim statistics. Do you remember Rabina Van Landschot?
Who decided to just get off the plane and tried to get her friends off the plane as well.
Yes, the Dutch tour guide. Mm-hmm. Exactly. She is the only survivor of the KLM side of this disaster. The legacy of the Tenerife disaster lives on in the procedures and the protocol that have made commercial aviation the safest form of transportation in the world today. Every pre-flight checklist, every standardized radio communication, every CRM training session carries with it the lessons that were learned on that foggy runway in the Canary Islands. And Zach, that is our story for today.
Well, that is an intense one. That is a lot of things happening and a lot of unfortunate death. But with that death came saving many, many other people.
Well, if you enjoyed this episode, if you're sick like me, and you actually enjoyed this, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We are also on social media, Final Boarding Call Pod, which is our Instagram. And then we also are on Facebook as well. We have a Final Boarding Call discussion group that you should join, and that's a ton of fun. Join us next time when we will be discovering another insane aviation event that changed history. Until then, remember to stow your tray tables, fasten your seatbelts, and prepare for the unexpected, because not every trip reaches its final destination. Goodbye.
Good night.